Seats on the stage, let me say that Dr. Pratt delivered an excellent talk. And Dr. Pratt, thank you that was a wonderful talk. You are a teacher's teacher. And I would urge the students in the audience to have paid attention to one thing that he said, that the most important things in medicine are clinical and morphology. And you can forget about the mutations, you can forget about the imaging, but if your clinical and pathology and morphology is good, you will rarely go wrong. So thank you very much. That was a wonderful talk. So we come to the rare cancers and the panel discussion, and a number of abstracts were discussed and presented. So let's first come to the clear cell carcinoma. And this was the trial that was earlier shown. And this is a trial that has compared irinotecan and cisplatin being compared with paclitaxel and carboplatin, and you see the regimens written there. And let me ask all the panelists, maybe we'll start with you, Bharat, because you're a pathologist. What fraction of the reports that you give for ovarian cancer are clear cell cancers?
Clear cell cancers within the epithelial ovarian cancers are one of the less common.
But in our
cancers.
series, how many? What fraction?
I can't give you the exact percentage, maybe 4 to 5%, something like that.
4 to 5%. Anybody else would want to venture a guess as to how many fraction?
Percentage, you're asking how much?
Yeah. Dr. Pratt, what fraction of your tumors are clear cell cancers in your series?
Officially 10%, but I think we see less than 10%.
Yes.
But I must say that many clear cell are misdiagnosed because clear cell is difficult to diagnose. It has
So is it
specific features, but sometimes some of the high-grade series.
So is it overdiagnosed or underdiagnosed?
I think they are overdiagnosed.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so anybody else would like to make a point about what fraction of our Dr. Sekho? Any idea about your?
Yeah, in our institute, I think a little less than 10%, not quite 10%.
Okay, less than 10%.
10%.
And anybody would like to say, Satinder, would you like to say, do you notice any stage predilection for clear cell cancers? Is it usually early stage, usually advanced stage? Can we please hand over the microphone?
Of course, they are very less, and usually what we see are early stage. Usually, stage 1 tumors are clear cells are usually present in early stage 1.
Usually stage 1?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, I quite agree with Satinder, because clear cell, many times it comes to us as a surprise. We are so sure the patient is going to be quite well, may not require adjuvant therapy, and suddenly the pathology is clear cell.
Okay.
I would just add to that,
Yeah.
the relative increase we're seeing in contrast to the previous is because certain markers have come up which are useful, and I find napsin A is a useful marker, being very sensitive. So the numbers perhaps are increasing, I would say, in contrast to what we've seen earlier.
So, just for everybody's understanding, some tumors from whatever I know can be 50% clear cell, 40% clear cell, 80% clear cell. When do you give the diagnosis of a clear cell carcinoma?
Yeah, clear cell carcinoma is based on 4 to 5 very basic morphologic features. And then we reinforce our diagnosis with certain markers. And it's generally a usual full clear-cut morphology of a clear cell.
No, so I often read the report that 20% of this tumor constitutes clear cell.
Yes.
So is that a clear cell carcinoma by its behavior or no?
In ovarian cancers, 10% of any component, if we see, we mention that. Having said that, clear cell coexists with endometrial carcinomas in some cases because they have an underlying common, histogenesis in terms of the endometriosis association. So that is there. We see in terms of component, but I think clear cell in itself, when we say clear cell, it is, it's a clear cell.
It is overwhelmingly clear cell. You have you were wanting to say something, Dr. Pratt.
I totally agree. I completely agree. I would add that there are many tumors that have clear cells which are not clear cell carcinomas.
Correct.
Okay? Clear cell carcinoma is very specific and tend to be overdiagnosed. And the single most, I think, the first cousin of clear cell is endometrioid.
Okay, excellent. So now this is the result of the Japanese trial, and incidentally in Japan, for some reason they report that 25% of their cancers are clear cell carcinomas, and nobody completely understands why that should be the case. So let's ask the medical oncologist. Let's start with you, Chetan. These are the headline results of irinotecan cisplatin versus paclitaxel carboplatin. What is your reaction? Would you have expected anything different? Are you disappointed? Are you appointed? Would you use?
Yes.
What would happen?
Yes, I am a little disappointed because I was expecting to get something out of irinotecan platinum combination. It is something which we are using in probably second or third line epithelial ovarian cancers anyways. And for this type of a tumor where once they relapse, they are generally very aggressive, and though they present in an early stage, once they relapse, they come back with a bang, and they are very difficult to treat. So I was expecting that maybe this combination would have some better results, but as it is seen that the good old paclitaxel carboplatin regime continues to be good.
Anybody else has any point to make? Yeah, Jyoti?
So the preclinical and clinical early phase data has suggested that irinotecan probably a better drug for this kind of variant, but this has not been proven in this study. I would rather think that because Japanese have more incidence and the JCOG trial, the dose-dense regimen was found to be successful. So probably that is among clear cell as well as other epithelial. So probably that could be
Okay,
an
so
option.
we'll come to that. But one thing I find very confusing. I have all along been told that clear cell carcinoma has a poorer prognosis. You look at the survival curve here. The disease-free survival at 60 months is close to 70%. I have never ever seen a survival curve similar to this for high-grade serous carcinoma. So does clear cell cancer have a better prognosis or a worse prognosis? And why should we give chemotherapy to stage 1A and 1B?
Sir, but these are majorities are again stage 1 in this. Rather, stage 1A, 1B, 1C constitutes, I think, 60% of the study cohort. And we all know that in stage 1 they do well. As well, I will not say better than EOC, but as well as epithelial ovarian cancers. And definitely this study, the results are much more, I mean, they're above average than you expect in a clear cell carcinoma.
Yeah, you were saying.
Only one thing which I feel about this is that the regimen in this is also monthly, so it includes, the duration of the chemotherapy will be more also, a month more again.
So let me show you the stage. So 16% are stage 1A and 1B, 51% are stage 1C, and 32% are stage 2 to 4. And I can bet you that a corresponding cohort of high-grade serous ovarian cancer will not have a 70% disease-free survival rate at about 5 or 6 years. What do you think of this? I'm confounded. I'm a little confused.
Yeah, I think time to rethink about classifying them as high grade, because anyway we classify them otherwise in type 1 ovarian cancer. They are not type 2. So I don't know whether time to reclassify them and not to give chemotherapy, what Sudeep was suggesting for stage 1A B disease. Yeah?
That is one, and second is we should look at the molecular signatures of clear cell vis-a-vis the high-grade serous.
And I think the
They are
other
totally
important
different.
here is, if you say these are not so high grade, and many of these are young women who have infertility, and conventionally once you have clear cell histology, we always recommend radical treatment. We don't advise them conservative surgery. So maybe if they are not really so aggressive, whether we can offer conservative surgery to these
You see,
women.
the point that is being made is the following, that clear cell carcinomas were categorized as high risk based solely on their propensity for chemoresistance. Now, chemoresistance is not necessarily synonymous with a high risk as in the propensity to relapse. And here, at least from my take on this study, one is the comparison between the two regimens, but the other take is that the outcome is actually not so bad, provided a decent surgery has been done. You were saying something.
Sir, I just wanted to make a point.
Yeah.
Though cisplatin and carboplatin is used interchangeably, in this particular thing, if we would have retained the carboplatin with the irinotecan, would that made a difference in the outcome?
So the more conventional understanding is that of the platinums, cisplatin is the more effective platinum, and if anything, carboplatin is a poorer cousin of
Then why,
cisplatin.
as a standard of care, we are using carboplatin in
That is, of course, because of reasons of tolerability, nausea, vomiting, hypokalemia, hypomagnesemia, urea, creatinine, neuropathy, And when you combine paclitaxel and cisplatin, both cause neuropathy and horrendous neuropathy. So for all those reasons.
So rather than
And in some cancers, when carboplatin and cisplatin were compared head to head, there was no difference. But for example, the germ cell community still continues to use cisplatin. Why don't we use carboplatin there?
The dose of cisplatin also seems quite odd, that they're using 60 milligram every 60 per meter square every
4 weeks. So yes, the dose intensity of cisplatin, as both of you have pointed out, is probably suboptimal here. But these are points. I still feel that on an average, clear cell carcinoma is chemoresistant, and whatever regimen you might have given to the patient, the outcome might have been more or less the same. Yes, Randeep.
Dr. Sahu had shown one post-hoc analysis of stage 2 to 4 where he had shown
Correct.
that Paclicarbo was better, because we all know that in stage 1 the drugs may not work. The drugs may work in stage 2, 3, 4 clear cell.
Right.
So if you some belief in that post-hoc analysis, then your first line preferable will be still Paclicarbo or
Yes,
Paclitaxel.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
if there would be a third arm of no chemotherapy, then probably we would be more sure that whether this is really benefiting.
Yeah, so the next randomized trial that you should conduct is chemotherapy versus not in completely operated clear cell carcinoma of the ovary. Yes. No, this particular study has not shown that. This particular study is only in clear cell carcinomas. The more than 600 patients who are randomized are only clear cell carcinomas. And only the Japanese could have done this study. But in their series of overall their national figures, about 20 to 25% are clear cell carcinomas. Can you please take the mic if you don't mind, so that everybody can hear you?
As a traditional teaching and histopathology wise, I'm a bit uncomfortable with that, because is there, what I'm submitting is that, is there a chance that we have overdiagnosed clear cell carcinomas?
Who, we or the Japanese?
The pathologist in the study. Or
The pathologist
Japanese.
in Japan.
Japan. Clear cell
So,
change
they said that there is a central review,
Agreed.
and most of the things that Japanese do, they do it to a very good standard. So,
Methodical,
to my mind, that may not be the
Agreed.
case.
Agreed. I'm
They are
only
very
comparing-
careful and very
I'm
conscientious.
just, comparing with the previous traditional things, because clear cell change is just a change. Suppose, as the clear cell change can be seen in mucinous tumors. Clear cell can be seen in other types of tumors. It's clear cell carcinoma is a specific diagnosis with specific morphological diagnostic criteria. Is it possible that we are over-diagnosing?
We means the Japanese. In this study, they have done the study. So, you are asking a question of them. To my mind, at least, to my mind, 97 or 98% of what they call clear cell must have been clear cell, according to me, because they did a central pathology review. And, whatever I've seen of whatever they do a good job. Okay. So anyways, yes, yeah.
Because when I was referring about the marker in APSIN, those studies, seminal studies, are coming from Japan only. So I think they will be doing. But having said, maybe we are not having true clear cell as so many.
Dr. Amit has a comment.
So traditionally, it is a very well known fact that the incidence of clear cell carcinoma is much higher than any other Western. It's a very well known entity that the incidence is much higher. It's about 15-20% as they have mentioned. And it's a very, very proven fact. Beyond any doubt.
Okay. So, yes, anything else? Yeah, you were saying
This is
something.
not a pure Japanese patient trial. It was an international trial.
Yeah, 92% of the patients are Japanese and 8% are European. So, it is overwhelmingly Japanese. There are about 8% are others.
I think, if I may, I think it's clear why, redundant, the clear cell carcinoma picture is so confusing. Number one, because many so-called clear cell carcinoma are just high-grade serous or other tumors of the ovary with clear cells. That's number one. Second, that this tendency to classify ovarian carcinomas in type 1, type 2, everything dualistic is false. It's just artificial. If you got 2, you got a 3, always. As it has been shown in the endometrium, from 2, we moved to 4. Now in the ovary, these 2 didn't, it was, the clear cell was put in type 2 just forcefully. You know what I mean? Artificially. So the picture of the clear cell is all distorted by this type 1, type 2 thing. Because if you really want to be honest, it's type 1, type 2, and clear cell. 3 at least, or 4, or 5.
So I think we all agree that pathologists have a high tendency to classification and sub-classification and sub-classifications. But you know, as clinicians, we still tend to aggregate some of those entities into a more manageable number. So let me ask you a different question. The glass can be half empty or half full. Is irinotecan cisplatin an option in some patients of clear cell carcinoma as first line? So for example, if there's a woman with diabetes and pre-existing neuropathy, would you consider giving it? Chetan, let me ask you, and then Jyoti.
Yeah, I think so. Based on the results, even for all stages put together, the survival at the end of 5 or even 72 months, so 6 years, doesn't seem to be bad at all with irinotecan cisplatin, in spite of all the low intensity of platinum and all. So this is a reasonable, and I must say that it was a very daring step to do such a study in face of a well-established regime. So probably yes, for a lady who is eligible or not eligible for paclitaxel or has a severe reaction to paclitaxel, I may consider it.
So Jyoti, you mentioned about the dose dense. So this is the subgroup analysis of the Japanese dose dense trial. And if you see, if anything, it was a clear cell / mucinous that did not benefit at all. And the others did.
So again, this is
So any
subgroup
thoughts?
analysis. So this is a subgroup analysis, but based on the previous study, I think both are acceptable regimen. And based on the toxicity or potential toxicity profile, we may choose either. I think
Okay.
both are equal.
Dr. Talwar, you have any?
Chemo resistant, so whether you give weekly or 3 weekly mucinous and clear cell, I think.
So that's a nihilistic point of view that nothing works.
But
So,
only thing I
so
was
everything
thinking in
will be the-
dose dense regimen works better when there is, even if there is some amount of resistance exists. That's why it was my thought, but the subgroup analysis
Okay.
doesn't corroborate with that.
Dr. Talwar,
One comment. Up to date also clearly mentions that they will not be using dose dense for these two, clear or mucinous. Based on this, the up to date also says the same thing.
Okay.
See, what I hear from Professor Jamie, this appears so chaotic in the sense that, again, we go back and say that clear cell is again a continuum. At this point of time, barring the morbidities, if the morbidities are there, I believe it could be interchangeable, but it is not practice changing.
Okay, so let's go to something that is more positive and more an optimistic outcome. So this was not one of the abstracts presented today, but this is the Canadian analysis of their early stage clear cell patients who were given adjuvant radiation. And you read here that, this was about a 20-year data of 241 patients. Because of differing beliefs as to its effectiveness, the radiation was consistently avoided by some oncologists. So essentially, this is not a randomized study, but the oncologists randomized themselves. So some gave and some refused to give radiation, others accepted. And this was the regimen, essentially 3 cycles of paclicarbo followed by abdominopelvic radiation, or only chemotherapy by those who did not believe in radiation, and that was 6 cycles of paclitaxel and carboplatin. And let me skip this. Essentially, again, it is seen that stage 1C for some reason constitutes a significant chunk of clear cell patients in all series. Stage 1C seems to be the predominant stage, but here are the results, radiation versus no radiation. And again, if you look at the outcomes on an average are actually not so bad. If you look at the disease-free survival, even at 3 or 4 years, it is actually above 60%, but patients who received radiation seem to be doing better. So let me ask you, Satinder.
Sir, actually, I have seen this also in Australia. Also, they are doing this thing for all endometrioid carcinomas and clear cell carcinoma. They are giving pelvic radiation because probably there's an association with endometriosis, and most of these do rupture during surgery, pre-op or intra-op, and that's why most of them came out to be 1C. And what they had said, the results. There was no published literature, but they were saying the radiation is showing much better.
So one other thing that I did not show here in the same paper was that patients who had a rupture only 1C stage disease actually did the same as stage 1A and 1B. So they did not have so that is why if you see here, on the left is stage 1A, 1B and rupture only 1C. So, but you know, the point is that will you refer your next patient in Dharamshila with stage 1B disease, clear cell to the radiation oncologist?
Need little more evidence.
Oh, more evidence, but that more evidence will never come. To my knowledge, no randomized trial is being done.
Sir, is it abdominopelvic artery which is required or only pelvic? Because it will make a lot of difference for the toxicity, as we all know from the previous studies.
But that, you know, I can't answer that question. That is why some oncologists did not believe in radiation. They did not send their patients, but others did. But now the question is that chemotherapy has reached a plateau, but radiation is showing some benefit. So now what to do? Dr. Talwar, what is your take?
See, if you send this to a medical oncologist, he'll come into the don't category. You said, no, they are the do's and the don'ts. So, if medical oncologist comes, he'll be the don't category. We'll give chemo. We won't consider radiation.
No, this radiation was in addition to chemo.
We won't give radiation.
We won't give radiation. Okay?
Apart from I agree that there will be some efficacy, but the delayed toxicity of radiation, adhesions and all this, especially for a young population with early stage disease, this can be detrimental later. So we are still using, it's not that we have completely abandoned radiation. We do use radiation in very selected cases when there is a
No, but here we are talking about adjuvant systematic radiation.
Adjuvant systemic radiation to the entire abdominopelvic area, which to my mind becomes it may have a lot of complications.
Jyoti?
So I think probably it is an indolent, that's what the previous study also showed, probably it is a low-grade indolent disease and probably chemotherapy is also not required. And radiation, again, a big query to me. Based on this kind of evidence, I will not send my another patient. Probably I would rather wanting not to treat and just observe.
Okay, I don't think that as per current evidence, one should take the message that one should not treat these patients. The current standard of care is to give them the usual chemotherapy with paclitaxel and platinum for 6 cycles. The question is whether,
See, in one situation, we are saying that this is a very, very aggressive tumor, this is a high-grade tumor, and there's a propensity to spread. And in the same breath, we are saying that for that tumor...
No, we never said that it has a propensity to spread. If you look at the fraction of patients with early-stage tumors, it is higher in clear cell compared to high-grade serous.
Stage 1
The diffuse peritoneal carcinomatosis usually happens in high-grade serous, not so much in the others.
But you have, extensive stage clear cell carcinomas also. But then if you think of a local modality in an aggressive tumor, I think it does not gel.
Okay. So Dr. Sekho, I think all the medical oncologists have more or less an identical opinion, so let me ask the gynae oncologist.
See, if we are talking about clear cell and an early stage, I think giving adjuvant chemotherapy is enough. Because I do not think for these young patients, I definitely would want more evidence before I send them off to the radiation people and tell them, okay, give them a whole abdominal RT, and then they come back with so many GI complications.
Okay.
No, I would take my call.
Okay, so you would also, anybody else you want to say something?
There are few guidelines who don't recommend chemotherapy for stage 1A and 1B, though 1C everyone recommends. So there is a case of not giving chemotherapy at least for stage 1A, 1B clear cell carcinoma. That is just a comment. I mean, it is not a homogeneous guidelines from all the oncologists, medical oncologists.
Okay, how much time do we have left?
7 minutes.
I can't see. Achha, it's there. 7. Okay, 7. Okay, so this is one case report from the MD Anderson group. And you see in one of their patients of clear cell cancer, who was resistant to multiple lines of treatment, established treatment, they did this NGS and found that the MAP kinase pathway and the PI3K AKT pathway, they were driver mutations. And this mutation in KRAS was also mentioned earlier in the previous talk. And then they treated this patient with metformin and this MEK inhibitor, MEK1 and MEK2. And they showed a dramatic response. So, we are essentially on 2 case reports when we look at new treatments for clear cell carcinoma. So, any thoughts? Would you subject your relapsed patients to NGS yourself?
So, yes, if you're pushed to the wall, yes, sir. I mean, if you have really exhausted your irinotecan, Pacli, or maybe gemcitabine and others, then we may try.
You may try. Okay.
So after 2 sets of chemotherapies,
yeah, I'm listening.
Yeah, after 2 sets of chemotherapies, probably I'll subject to NGS.
Okay, after 2 lines of treatment. Anybody else you wanted to make a point?
It's interesting. if you put that other slide up, when you say can you go back a slide? Two more, another one? So when you say we're down to case reports, that's what it's going to be like with personalized medicine, because we're going to test the cancers for predictive biomarkers and then select drugs if they're druggable. And so if you look here at that slide.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so one more. The second row, the PI3AKT-mTOR pathway has drugs like everolimus, temsirolimus. These are mTOR inhibitors. And if you look at clear cell cancers under the microscope, they look exactly like renal cell carcinoma. And renal cell carcinoma in the United States, mTOR inhibitors are FDA approved to manage that type of disease. And so we're going to be starting a trial within the cooperative group of looking at mTOR inhibitors in clear cell cancers. And so it's very common that different histologies from different parts of the bodies respond to the same drugs. Seminoma of the testis responds to bleomycin and etoposide platinum, just like dysgerminoma of the ovary. Neuroendocrine tumor of the lung, platinum and etoposide. Same thing with neuroendocrine tumors of the cervix. So similarly, I think clear cell cancer, the ovary, and renal cell carcinoma may respond to mTOR inhibitors.
Right. I think you're correct, but we still need to generate evidence, and I believe it's a GOG 268, which is testing temsirolimus in the adjuvant setting. Okay, so let's go to the low-grade ovarian cancers. And this was the abstract from UK, the Royal Marsden series. 46 patients, low response rate, PFS 8 months, OS 62 months. Any thoughts? When you look at a disease that has a PFS of 8 months but an OS of 62 months, what are your thoughts? Satinder, let's start with you. Can you please hand the mic over to her?
So basically, it's the biology of the tumor that's a slow-growing, indolent course of nature of the tumor itself, which is helping out, maybe not be the chemotherapy or anything else.
So, should we treat these low-grade serous ovarian cancers with chemotherapy, or should we just let them be?
So it's like a typical strong ER positive breast cancer that they may have early relapse, but they keep on responding to subsequent lines of treatment of hormonal manipulation or one after the other.
So actually they don't respond, but if you look at the disease stability rate, that's substantially higher. So 44% disease stability, but only a 10% response.
Yeah, so they keep surviving. I mean, with all these therapies, the disease is kept at bay, and the survival goes on. So something like that may be happening here.
Okay, so let's come to hormonal therapy, and this was the meta-analysis. 35 trials, 1,700 patients, and the pooled estimate of response rates was 37% in all patients, 31% for AI, 40% for tamoxifen, better for ERPR positive tumors, which was 43% compared to ERPR negative, which was 17%, and surprisingly better for tamoxifen at 20 milligram per day versus higher dose of tamoxifen at 36%. So any thoughts? Should we test ovarian cancer routinely for ER and PR?
Yeah, this is very thought-provoking. You have the driver, you can block it, and you get the desired results. Definitely.
So, what do you all say? Are you looking forward to now reports of ERPR and even HER2 in mucinous tumors in ovarian cancer?
Actually, we are looking for this. Sorry.
Very low-grade tumors, I think perhaps we should definitely do a ERPR, or we should start doing. But I'm not so sure whether we need to do the same for high grade.
Yeah. We have a fair proportion of high grade. In fact, majority of the population of ovarian cancers is going to be high grade. So if the treatment is not going to be very toxic, very expensive, and very troublesome, I think there is no harm in testing it at least.
Okay.
On all patients, irrespective of.
Jyoti, you were saying something?
Yeah, in a very cost-effective manner, we can treat them, and because response is more in ERPR positive, it is a better idea to test them.
But it was still 17% in ERPR negative.
Yeah, so both should be treated, but it's better idea to have it is kind of a prognostic marker also.
So the universal demand from all the clinicians is that you should routinely report on ER and PR.
But I would mention the kind of tumors that show, like Dr. Sekon mentioned, it's generally the low grades. The high grades don't express ERPR.
Okay, let's say in low grade, do you want to routinely report ER and PR in low grade?
You can report ERPR.
No, but it is not being reported. I mean, you can report, but I've never seen a routine report.
Yeah, because we report.
Though we are trying to classify low grade into one particular class, it has still some more subsets. ER positive subset, ER negative subset with totally different responses to the AI and tamoxifen. So maybe these ERPR negative will behave like a triple negative and be more sensitive to chemo.
So that is a high-grade serous, but yes, you were saying something. That's a high.
We don't routinely mention the ERPR is because it is not for the diagnosis. Our purpose is to establish a diagnosis.
No, the purpose is not just to, even in breast cancer, ER and PR is not reported for the purpose of diagnosis.
At this point in time, but as now it becomes useful in terms of, influencing the treatment, so we are doing in terms of whenever we get the...
Whenever you get the requisition. But that's not the case, you should just routinely report it.
So we can do that.
No, but should it be or should it not? Achha, you are reporting it in all low grade. Okay, so at Tata Hospital, they are reporting it in all patients. Okay.
Low grade, not high grades.
Low grade serous cancers. Okay. So here is another analysis from Dr. Gershenson. And here it was, at least in the presentation, I don't see any ER and PR. So, but it is low grade serous. And here with hormonal maintenance therapy, PFS from 27 to 64 months, OS from 98 to 115 months. So we've taken that question. So should we start giving hormonal maintenance therapy to all low-grade serous cancers?
Yes.
Jyoti?
Yes.
We should?
We should.
Actually, this is a retrospective, of course, this is thought-provoking, but to use it as a practice routinely with this type of analysis is difficult. The strength and the evidence which this analysis will have, but definitely it is thought-provoking. Other thing which this study teaches is that if there is a suboptimal response, that doesn't cover up. That doesn't mean that if you put them on maintenance therapy, you will be able to cover up R+ resection or a suboptimal cytoreduction. I think these are the two main messages. But yes, of course, thought-provoking, I would like in an individual case to be put.
So let me just first poll all the medical oncologists on the panel. How many of you think that we should give routine hormonal maintenance to low-grade serous ovarian cancer as part of first line? But you just said that we should not.
The strength of evidence as to be used as a routine practice is the strength of evidence with a retrospective 25-year analysis.
When you saw the 4 hands go up, you also raised your hand.
This was like a strength of evidence. Definitely the difference, if you see, is actually huge of 25 or 30. It's 50 months difference.
Can you please speak into a mic? Please, whoever is giving the mics, we should not just stand at the back. People are here asking questions.
Okay, first thing, you'll never get a phase 3 trial. Second is the p-value is 0.27. And that is something that is staggering. And you have nothing to lose with giving a tamoxifen, especially with hysterectomy done.
But then you give it, continue.
Yeah, till progression, definitely. And you have already hysterectomy done, so basically endometrial cancer is also gone off. So I feel it's fair enough.
Okay, so most people here, I have my reservations and I'll tell you why. You see, Dr. Gershenson had a total cohort of 544 patients and he is reported on about 200 of them, and the other 340 are excluded for one or the other reason. And even though, this data looks quite impressive, we should have, 340 of the 544 patients are not reported. So how do we know that, it would have turned out the same way, but nevertheless the data is thought-provoking. Yeah, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, in fact, I wanted to ask, what is the major toxicity of tamoxifen?
The major toxicity of tamoxifen is...
No, with the hysterectomy done. We are not talking of...
deep vein thrombosis to some extent.
It can cause, it can exacerbate menopausal symptoms, it can cause deep vein thrombosis, it can cause ocular toxicity. It can cause steatohepatitis in the liver. There are a lot of
So
things.
is it a dangerous drug? It is no, with all this, it is sounding a very dangerous drug. So before we launch off on this, that we want to give tamoxifen to all low-grade serous,
see, all drugs, there is a balance of benefit and toxicity. No drug is without any side effects.
Exactly. So that's what I just wanted to highlight. that
Okay.
I think we can give tamoxifen to all low-grade serious this thing with a word of caution.
Can we say that for
So she's talking about AIs.
They will have much more, ma'am. Again, then the bone loss and other things will start. Osteoporosis, bone loss, fractures.
Also
the things
cardiovascular toxicity.
and cardiovascular.
Can we have
Okay.
it like for early stage not to use it but use it for advanced stages, because early stage anyways the disease is, it is such a low grade early stage, they will have a good prognosis, but maybe
Okay. So I also wanted to point out here that, if you look at the difference between PFS, it is 27 versus 64. In the OS, it is almost 100 months versus 115. And if you compare the two slides, in the no treatment arm, PFS is 27, but OS is 100 months. So essentially, even though the patients relapse, they still go on to live for approximately the same time period. But with all its caveats, I must say that this is a thought-provoking and something at least worth considering. We can have our individual opinions on whether we should do it routinely or not, but our submission to the pathologist is that at least we should get the report of ER and PR. Okay, germ cell tumors. So, TIP regimen, let me quickly ask you. These are the results in intermediate and high risk patients. And these results seem better than the historical results with the usual BEP regimen. So let me ask you, are you tempted to use the TIP regimen in a 23-year-old woman with yolk sac tumor with retroperitoneal nodes and multiple liver metastasis with a high AFP? TIP.
So this is obviously a high-risk patient with the multiple parenchymal liver mets. For this type of patients, anyway, the NCCN also recommends an IFOS-based regime. So you can use an IFOS-based regime instead of BEP.
So what regimen do you usually use for this?
Usually vinblastine-based VEIP regime, or, well, if the only concern is about the dose of paclitaxel, which is almost 40% higher,
Okay.
30-40% higher.
Okay. Anybody else has a comment to make on the
day 1 and day 2? I do not know why it was like this. It is day 1 and day 2 paclitaxel.
Yes, 120 milligram per meter square and day 1 and
day 2.
You want
Sorry,
to say? So response adapted treatment. Anybody?
There were two arms, that MSKCC, in which the 2 BEP was given followed by high dose and versus 4 BEP. And that was compared with TIP, and TIP fared versus those two arms. So I think TIP would be better when you give.
Okay. Okay. So anybody for autologous high dose chemotherapy and autologous stem cell transplant? This is the EBMT data. Randeep? Are you planning to send your next patient for transplant?
So in last 5 years, only one testicular GCT has been referred for transplant by me. But definitely it is to be taken care that these patients are, either you do it in second line, third line as a separate debate, but then they shall be non-mediastinal and then they shall have a good response to platinum, and there shall be some disease-free interval at least 6 months after giving, or at least they shall be responding to the chemotherapy, markers shall be negative. If that subset is there and the patient is willing to take it as one of the high dose therapy, then it shall be.
Okay. Yes.
Sir, it will not work actually. Sir, but if you see, sir, I
Germ
agree.
cell tumor, it is in fact reverse. They say that platinum sensitivity is not a must.
In the overwhelming majority of these patients, there were about, I think, 25 plus, about 50 patients. In the overwhelming majority, carboplatin was a part of the conditioning regimen. So I don't know whether, even though it is high dose carboplatin, I agree with you, but whether it will work in platinum resistant is still open to
So when
question.
you say platinum resistance, this corresponds to 2 sets of chemotherapies. Beyond that, this becomes an ambiguous situation. Platinum sensitivity resistance is first line, second line. After second line, the definition per se says that definition ceases to hold. So in this case, one has to respect the drug resistance. Second, if the general condition and the performance status of the patient is good and the patient is properly counseled and you have CR rates, when you're doing transplant, then I think that is the subset which would benefit.
No, it is not that you bring the patient into remission and then do a transplant. The germ cell tumor. In germ cell tumor,
No, I'm saying 2 sets of chemos after that.
You document, yes, and you go ahead.
Sir, I wanted to say that they shall be responding to chemotherapy. That is the utmost criteria. If they are not responding to any sort of therapy, as Dr. Talwar is saying, there is no point
Okay,
in
I
doing
think
transplant.
at some point of time we'll request Naveen Khatri to educate all of us as to which are the patients that he takes. But my personal experience is that he rejects almost everybody that I send to him. And I'm going to have a talk with him. In my opinion, it is still a useful treatment for at least some of the patients.
Yeah, but even if there are partial responses or some response present, perhaps the high dose therapy, as Dr. Dabar is saying, can make more difference. So I think even in patients who are not doing very well, because patients who are doing very well to chemotherapy, probably we may not require BMT. But on those who are having only some response, it
They
is
should
a
be
better
immediately
option.
taken up.
Okay, perfect.
Unlike Dr. Khatri does.
Okay, so any other parting comments from the audience? If not, then we'll thank the panelists for a very interactive session and thanks to all of you for listening to us.